The Dialogue.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the next episode of our Tech for Good series, where we are talking to experts and stakeholders across India's policy spectrum to understand how technology can play an important role in combating and mitigating the impact of lockdown. And today we have a very special guest with us. We have a lawyer with us, Mr. NL Rajah. He is a senior advocate in Madras High Court. He has been practicing since 1986 and has been a former president of the Madras Consumer Courts Bar Association, and also been involved in Consumer and Civic Action Group, an organization which is dedicated to creating awareness among consumers about their rights and helps them realize the same. He's also traveled globally. He has been an international visitorship program of the US government. And in 2013, he participated in a week-long deliberation of the UN CITRAL to bring out a model contract to regulate online dispute resolutions. Mr. Rajah has expertise across various spectrum, and we are grateful to you, sir, for talking to us today. The objective for today, sir, is to understand, now we are in the middle of the lockdown and we are nearing the end. The two-thirds of lockdown is over, but still we have been seeing a lot of challenges with respect to the way organizations have been trying to make sure that the essential items are supplied to the consumers. Now, one of the key challenges which we have been seeing is the fact that given that law and order is a state subject, how can we ensure for the coming days ahead that we have better coordination between the local authorities, the state authorities, as well as the central government?
Yes, we are traveling through difficult times. The emphasis is not going to be so much on how we anticipate problems, but how effectively we respond to problems. Because this is, as many people call it, this is a black swan. A black swan is something which nobody anticipated. But in these times, therefore, it is required that the state responsiveness is at an acceptable level. There are many things that the state must do, but one thing that we need to understand is that after 14th April, in whatever form, a large percentage of or large measure of looking after our lives is going to be thrusted into our hands, whether there's going to be a partial lifting, what is prevailing today, or whether it is going to be fully lifted. There is going to be a shift from the state exercising what might be called the parental control over its citizens to the citizens taking responsibility for their own lives in differing measures. So we need to be aware of that. And therefore, we need to be prepared for that second phase. It may be a gradual lifting of the lockdown, but there is definitely going to be an easing. And therefore, we need to be prepared for that phase. The first thing that I would suggest is that all citizens must, after April 14, must have a domestic protocol of how they are going to deal with the lockdown. Even if it's going to be a partial lockdown, we need to have our own domestic protocols about how we deal with it. Some ideas that come to mind are that elders must not step out. People who have problems, health problems, must not step out. The lockdown must continue as far as they are concerned. Unnecessary trips outside the house must be completely eliminated. And we need to be very, very careful in how we protect ourselves in terms of personal hygiene, in terms of ensuring that we wear masks when we go out, in terms of washing our hands, in terms of ensuring that we do not touch our faces. These are protocols that we need to set for ourselves. Therefore, there's going to be one set of protocol you set to yourself. There's going to be a bunch of protocols that you set for the household. And therefore, there is also going to be a bunch of protocols which the state puts in place to protect its citizens. So in that step, I think the first thing that the state has to understand is it is not going to be possible to completely lock down essential services. So the first thing that the state has to do, even if it is only a preliminary list, is to start making a list of essential services. The list can be modified. It can be added to. Certain services may be taken out of the list if there is confidence that it need not be reckoned as part of essential services. But the important thing is that you need to make this list. That you need to make a list. The state must. Every state government must make a list of essential services which to protect.
Right.
That's the first step. So having done that, the second step is to ensure that in respect of people working in these essential sectors, curfew passes are issued for employees who are going to work in these sectors. So that's the second step. The third step is that towards this end, the state must set a state protocol. It's not advisable for every district to have a different protocol for applications to be made for these curfew passes. So there must be a state protocol as to how you file applications for these curfew passes. The fourth is that it is preferable that these applications are regulated through the electronic mode, so that you don't, this doesn't result in people crowding at the office of the person who's going to be issuing the process. Following this must also be a state set of guidelines on what qualifies for these curfew passes to be issued. And also importantly, there must be a protocol for how policemen will deal with people who have these curfew passes. Policemen are doing an excellent work till now, and we must commend them for whatever steps they have taken. They've been working day and night.
Right.
Collectively, we must be thankful for the help and assistance they have rendered. But it is also important that people who are working in these essential services are not unduly harassed. Therefore, the state must also set in place protocol to ensure smooth interaction between the police and the persons who hold these curfew passes. Lastly, I would say what is important is that the state also sets up an online system of complaints to be made by people who hold curfew passes if they find that there is any glitch in the working of this system, or if they have any complaints against specific police officers. So that must also be put in place, and all these must form a coherent framework so that implementation of this becomes easy. That's extremely important because there are citizens who are currently being denied access to certain vitamins, things like books, access to certain things which they may consider as an essential part of their lives. All this is being denied to them because e-commerce has not been functioning in a robust manner. It has been functioning before the lockdown was issued. So even though it may be difficult to come back to that state immediately, but we need to ease in the curbs and ensure that there is a smooth transition to that period where everything becomes available through e-commerce. That's what I would say what the state has to do to smoothen this process of institutionalizing the workers in the essential services, being able to deliver unhampered services.
Right. So you mentioned about various areas, various protocols which can be implemented, and really great ideas, I must say. I wanted to sort of discuss a couple of things moving on. One is that, we've been hearing that we might have an extension of the lockdown in terms of a lot of state governments are talking about the need to do that. Center is mulling over the data. They're looking at, now we are, I think, on day 14 of the lockdown. So I think people who contracted COVID-19 on just during the time of the lockdown was announced should start showing symptoms by now. So the real effectiveness of the lockdown will actually start showing or start getting demonstrated from today onwards or coming days. Where do you see this moving ahead? I mean, there are two possible scenarios. One, of course, is a gradual sort of shift and, lowering the sort of intensity. But the other is a lot of stakeholders are talking about extending that. Now, if that happens, where do we go and how will the state ensure that essential items are supplied to the people?
No, I think the first thing that we have to demand, and I think in fact the government is doing it already, is that any decision on these issues will have to be taken after broad-based discussions. So the central government, in fact, is discussing with various state governments. The state governments, in turn, must discuss with all stakeholders to come to a decision as to how exactly they operationalize this easing of the lockdown. So it is very difficult to say. I would say that calls for a lot of expertise inputs, and that expertise will have to be taken into account before the government. There are very, very many conflicting demands. There are diametrically opposite demands on the government. It's not a very easy thing for the government to do. But one thing the government has to realize that there is a large percentage of our people who are in the unorganized sector. Because there is a lot of talk about the necessity to provide lives rather than livelihood. I completely agree with that. But having said that, we must understand that for a lot of people, livelihood is life. I mean, imagine myself in the situation of a person who is not covered by any of the poverty alleviation schemes, nor am I in, upper middle class or upper middle class or the rich,
Right.
and will depend on day-to-day wages to sustain me. The question is, how does that person sustain himself in the coming days if there is to be a complete lockdown? These are only inputs which I think the government should consider. It is not a question of saving the economy. Economy need not be saved. I mean, the economy will cover itself. But I think more important thing that we need to do is how do we ensure that the have-nots are not badly affected on account of these laws. So my assessment, I may be right, I may be wrong, but I think what is going to happen is going to be a partial and graded easing of the law. That appears to be the only possible solution in the current situation. Because once again, there are people, because the emphasis on COVID is so huge, there are also people who may otherwise require medical attention who are not getting that medical attention. But in the last 3 weeks, what is highly commendable is that we are pushing ourselves into a state of preparedness. We are ensuring that we have adequate number of ventilators. We are ensuring that we have adequate number of hospital beds. One only hopes that this is all properly spread over all parts of the country and is just not concentrated on the urban clusters. I also think that the state is going to go all out in identifying difficult clusters, because now they are trying to start this door-to-door examination to identify people who are suffering from the virus, and also people who have come in touch with them. I think there will be a cluster clampdown. That's my feeling, that there might be clusters which
So you mean to say hotspots being identified and those hotspots sort of being
identified. But all that, all this is still in the realm of speculation. I'm sure that the government will take in, inputs from various stakeholders. That's really the way to go. The government must take in inputs from various stakeholders and then must put in a proper, measure of how they regulate this.